This recording may contain content unsuitable for children.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Dungeoncast. I'm your host, Will.
And I'm your host, Brian.
This is the podcast where we talk about everything Dungeons & Dragons, from busty barmaids to burly bugbears. And today's topic is, what is D&D?
Prepare yourselves.
I cast Fireball. The Dungeoncast.
Excellent. Let's get right into it. So, Will, what is D&D?
D&D is the world's most popular tabletop RPG. I've been playing for about 6 years now. And I started as a player, and now I tend to be a dungeon master most of the time, which are two completely different aspects of the game, which are very difficult to explain to people who don't know what the game is. But D&D, which stands for Dungeons and Dragons, and as a tabletop role-playing game, it's a game you tend to play in a group around a table with, dice and pen and paper, and the whole point of the game is to kind of assume a role that you don't normally, you would just never normally experience in life. You assume the role of a fantasy character, whether that be a fighter with a sword and shield, or an elven archer, from the wilds, or a hyper intelligent wizard who's looking for more power, or whatever it is you want it to be.
So typically in a Dungeons and Dragons game, we have a setting that's like a more medieval, more like Tolkien kind of.
Yeah, generally, that's the classic D&D setting. You can realistically, you can set D&D wherever you want it to be. But when most people are playing D&D, they're playing in a high fantasy, Tolkien-esque or WoW kind of fantasy setting with orcs and elves and the like.
Yeah, like World of Warcraft, definitely.
Yeah.
So I noticed that, like, when you're playing D&D, you have the role-playing aspect and the fantasy aspect of things, but you also have a mechanical implementation that kind of makes you play the game to, there's a set of rules basically that you play by.
Yeah. A lot of people can be a little intimidated by D&D because it's a book full of rules and all the things you need to know to play, and it's like, man, that's a lot to read. I don't really feel like I could get into this. But when you think about it, like, D&D is just adults playing make believe, and the rules that are in the book are just kind of like the groundwork so that, like, it doesn't get out of hand. Because I think we've all been, I'm sure most of us, when we were kids, we played some sort of form of make-believe with our friends, and they're like, cops and robbers or whatever, and there was always that moment where you're like, bang, bang, I got you, and they're like, no, you didn't. And
yeah,
like,
I've got my bulletproof vest on, though. You didn't count for that.
Exactly.
Like, oh, did you come in with a bulletproof vest? Like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have my bazooka now, and I blew up the ground. And what are you going to do about that? Oh, well, you didn't know I could fly?
I think we could all agree. Fuck that kid. Because he ruined it for everybody. He ruined it for you. He ruined it, and, you never really played that again.
So the rules are in place to keep things from spiraling
out of control. Yeah. So you have like the set rules, which, some would say there's too much rules. Some would say there's not enough, and you can kind of decide for yourself what rules you will and won't follow. But the other kind of end of keeping things from getting out of control is the dungeon master of the group. So let's actually kind of talk about that. Let's talk about, like, what it takes to play a game. You have two types of positions, if you will, in the game. You have the players, which are the people assuming the fantasy rules, the ones that build their characters and have a name and have a backstory and have character sheets. But then you have the dungeon master, and he's kind of the arbiter of the game as a whole, from any type of non-player person or character that you come across in the game to the one enforcing all the rules, handling the combat of all the monsters that you may fight, and creating the dungeons and the whole world around you.
So a dungeon master is responsible for the environment that the players are going to be set in.
Mm-hmm. The environment, and as the players as the players make all the decisions and reactions to what the dungeon master presents to them, the dungeon master then has to be responsible for the reaction of the environment and the people and everything in the world to what the players do. D&D's an interesting game because unlike other games where like the point is to win, there was an end goal, an end game, if you will. In D&D, it's collaborative storytelling. Like no one knows where the game's going to go because you never know what your players are going to do, and the players never know what's going to happen when what they do comes across their dungeon master's plate.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite elements of the game is that the dungeon master can set up this elaborate maze of issues and problems, and there can be lots of people in this world, and the players they have all this freedom. They can do almost anything they want within that, and that's why the mechanics are important. Like you can't do anything, but within reason. I mean, you could talk to anybody. You could take an action that changes the course of the entire party's campaign, and yeah. So as a dungeon master, what do you try to do to keep your players from like totally taking things off the rails and out of your hands, or do you just let them kind of run the game to some degree?
Well, me personally, there's multiple ways to handle that. Some DMs are just like, nah, do whatever you want to do, man. Fuck it, let's just go. Like, let's see where this crazy train fucking goes. Others kind of go the other way on that, and I don't really agree with it, where it's called railroading, where it's like no matter what the players do, they always will end up where the dungeon master wants them. And that's, to me personally, that's not a fun way of playing, but you know what? Everyone's game is their own. For me, for the most part, I've just gotten used to having to improvise. I find that to be the most fun part of the game is like, as a dungeon master, like I'll have this elaborate campaign set up where stuff's going on in the background, stuff like my players don't even know. And then my player will unwillingly do something that will just completely derail it. I'm like, oh man, now what happens? Let's see. Let's find out. We're going to go with it.
Okay, so Will, why don't you tell me what makes Dungeons and Dragons unique? What makes it different from playing other kinds of role-playing games? Maybe what's another example of a role-playing game that's comparable?
It's comparable to D&D?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because like when people talk about RPGs now, they're usually referring to video games. Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy. Those are some of the most all-time famous RPGs there are. The reason they're called RPGs is because they are role-playing games. You're supposed to kind of get into the role of your characters. And what's funny about it, all those video games that we all know and love today, they actually derive a lot, if not most, of their content and ideas from the original D&D game made back in the 70s. So D&D is a little bit different from those kind of role-playing games because D&D really kind of forces you to break out of your shell and assume a role. Role-playing, it's basically acting. You're acting, and you created a character, and that character has a totally different personality and backstory and everything than you could ever have in your life, and you have to assume that role. And a lot of people find that a little uncomfortable to kind of start to do. They feel a little bit embarrassed or a little shy, but like when you get into it, that's what makes this game so unique and so gratifying and so much fun is role playing makes this game an adventure, and that's what this game's about. It's about adventuring.
Would you say that the difference between being a good player and a not so good player would be like staying in character? How important is it to be the persona that you've made for the game? How important is it to stick to that?
I mean, I think it's definitely paramount to stick to character. I think that there's a lot of things though that can make a difference between a bad and a good player.
Is there such a thing as a bad player?
Unfortunately, yeah. Unfortunately, there is. You get there's so many stereotypes within the gaming world of D&D. You get what are called the power players, the min maxers, the ones who their sole, like, the thing that they're deriving from the game the most is, like, how can I make the most powerful character ever who's just good at everything and just can't be stopped?
Right.
And on the surface, that sounds awesome. And honestly, a lot of people will gravitate towards that when they're new time players, because that's kind of how you play video games. You know, you want to make the best.
Who doesn't want to be like, you want to collect all your armor and the best weapons, and you want to tear up that bad guy.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's actually kind of detrimental to not only the players around you and the dungeon master, but to yourself and the game itself, because nothing interesting can happen when you're just always the best and you always succeed. So I find that there's nothing wrong with playing to your character's strengths and trying to make them the best at whatever it is they do. But when you do it to a point where that's just everything, you're playing the wrong game. Like, there's other games where you could do that, where you can get that, you could scratch that itch of min-maxing. Why D&D? Why the role-playing game? That just doesn't seem to be the place to do that. For me, D&D is more about the social aspect, getting out there and talking, hanging out with friends, having a good time, and assuming another role and doing collaborative storytelling.
So when you're in character, these characters have strengths that you've addressed, but what about the other end of that? Like, what are, like, so these characters are obviously supposed to have flaws.
Right.
What do you recommend when you're building a character, how to allocate your strengths and weaknesses, because you do get to decide somewhat what those are going to be?
Right. Well, I mean, for example, if you're building a fighter, you're probably going to want to be strong. That makes the most sense.
Yeah, you're going to be fighting.
Yeah, and you want to be able to endure,
physical hand-to-hand combat.
Physical hand-to-hand combat. You're probably pretty athletic. This is, of course, assuming a lot of things. So, like, your weakness might be your intelligence or your charisma. Maybe you're not the most sociable or charismatic person. I think it's important to have flaws and weaknesses, because, honestly, those are the problems you're going to come across during your character's adventure that you're going to have to overcome. And oftentimes what can happen is either hilarious or bizarre, or you just would have never seen it coming, and that's what makes the game fun.
Yeah, I've seen some players have to use their strengths versus their weaknesses to think their way out of a position that they've put themselves in because of those things.
Right.
I find that really interesting when I'm watching a game and I see, oh, well, that guy's not very smart, but he's got to talk to somebody that is, or maybe like solve an issue that would take some intelligence, and he's maybe put himself in a compromising position.
Right.
Maybe he can smash his way out.
Yeah, and maybe he can, or maybe he can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that might segue us into the next thing, which is being a player in a party.
Right.
So what do you do? So there's typically, how many players are going to be under a single dungeon master?
I mean, you can do it just one-on-one, and some people do. I like to have 3 to 5 players. Usually 4. 4 is a sweet spot for me. I like having 4 players. It usually comes out to a well-rounded group. I've seen up to like 8, 9, 10 players, which to me is madness. Like, I don't know how a DM keeps that under control at all.
Yeah,
or
you have
how
to manage so much.
Yeah, or like everyone's got to fit in to, like, most people play from like 3 to 4 hours. Like, when everybody wants to do what they want to do, like, how do you fit 10 people into that? That's crazy. I don't know. But yeah, generally, you'll have anywhere from like 2 to 5 players under one DM.
Okay, so why don't we get more in depth about creating a character? Like, what do you do? Where do I start? How do I begin?
Right. Okay, so there are in 5th edition D&D, there are 3 major components to character creation. First is you're going to choose probably your class first. And classes in D&D are kind of like what you do. Are you a wizard? Are you a warrior of some sort? Are you a religious character like a cleric or a paladin? Are you more of a nature-y type character like a ranger or a druid? A bard, that's another class. And then kind of the flip side of like what you do is who and what are you? And that can be expressed through 2 things: your race and your background. Now, your race is kind of like, what species are you? And D&D, you have all your classic fantasy species like, humans, elves, dwarves, halflings. Most people probably recognize hobbits. Hobbits and halflings are kind of interchangeable. And then you have more like exotic races like dragonborn, which are kind of like dragon men, or tieflings, which are like humans with a little bit of devil blood in them, and there's just so many races out there, and your race kind of dictates some things that you can do and some like pluses to different abilities and whatnot. And then of course your background is kind of like what you did before you became whatever your class is. So you're a fighter, but your background is you're a gladiator. That's the kind of fighter you are. Or an outlander for a ranger is usually a good background. Like you've been roaming the ranges out there, and like you can survive out in the wild.
So there are mechanical things that make picking a race in a class. They'll give you certain statistics, right? So that
right.
What control does a player have over that beyond picking a race in a class? What can they do to make their character their own?
Okay, so after you've chosen your three major components of background, class, and race, the way you get more into the customization bit is that in D&D you have 6 ability scores, which are strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And each of them plays a part in what your character can do, whether that's skills they have or spells they cast, or their attacks, or their ability to evade a trap or a spell. And you have a couple ways of coming up with the numbers for your ability scores. I would say the most common way is there's a pre-generated standard array of numbers that you can just mix and match and plug into wherever you want them to be, and then go ahead and add all your racial and class stuff to it.
And where would I find that standard array?
You'd find that standard array in the player's handbook, which is the most important of the 3 books that you'll most likely need if you're looking to get into D&D long term. Another way of allocating those scores, in the way I kind of like to do it, and it's a little bit controversial actually. Some people like hate this way, other people like live by it, and that's rolling for your stats. Kind of gives it a more of a random feel. And what you do there is you're going to roll a set amount of dice and add them together and allocate them to whatever score you want them to be.
So you get to decide. So if I roll a certain stat and I want that to be my attack, based off of my race and my class, I can make all these stats that I roll. I pick and choose which ones go where.
That's how I do it. And if I think the player's handbook, that's how they have you do it. Some people do it differently. Some people are like, no, you roll them in order. Strength, con, dex, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. And what you roll is what you roll, and that's what you get. And that's a fun way to play, but that's not how I usually do it. Because the last thing I want is to have one player who's like uber powerful at everything, and one player who just rolled fucking shitty. And they have a shitty guy. And
well, I guess you suck for the whole campaign.
Yeah,
have fun,
and then they quote unquote commit suicide in some sort of way. They get their character killed because they want to re-roll. And
okay.
Oh yeah, that happens. That's a thing.
So I guess what else can you do? So that's the mechanical side of things where I'm seeing that you can.
Yeah. We could do a whole episode on character creation, and probably will. So let's not get to the nitty gritty.
What should you do beyond rolling stats? Like most characters have like filling out your backstory and things like that.
Yeah, I'd say outside of the mechanics, your most important part is coming up with a cool character. Like, okay, so you're a ranger, and you're an outlander. You've been doing it a while, and you're an elf. Okay, so those are your 3 mechanical aspects. But like, who are you? What's your name? Like, how did you get there? What have you been doing your whole life? Like, what happened to you in your past? How was your childhood? Some people get crazy in depth to their backstories. I've had players give me literally a 5-chapter. This is my character's backstory. And it was awesome. It was great. Has
anyone that done that ever died in like the first 4 games or something like that?
No, God, that'd be horrible. I'm so sorry. No, he's the only one who's ever done that, and no, he didn't die. He lasted the entire campaign, thank God.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That going to waste.
Yeah. But other players are real basic about it. It's like, no, here's just the basic paragraph, and there are pros and cons to doing it either way, so whatever you prefer. I'm kind of in between that. I usually will have maybe a page, like from top to bottom, of like everything you need to know about my guy as my dungeon master, and I'm looking to explore. Let's go.
Something I see some players kind of leave out that I've noticed is like how they became an adventurer, because almost every player in Dungeons and Dragons that's going to be under a dungeon master is going to be on an adventure.
Yeah, that's that's the game. The game of D&D is adventurers adventuring and like where that goes. Again, I would say that's inspired from literally Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. It's a group of adventurers that got together. They had a quest. They went. So
typically in a game, as a dungeon master, you're going to be sending your players somewhere.
Yes, yeah, for the most part. Some DMs don't. Some DMs are just like, let's just see what happens. We're gonna make this up as we go. I tend to have like an overarching story that is ongoing, and I will try and push and nudge my character subtly in the direction that I want them to go, or towards the major quest, if you will. But it's always in the power of the players to derail that if they so choose. But yeah, generally, you're gonna have overarching quests, whether they be small or big.
Hey everyone, we wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for listening. We really appreciate your support. If you like what we do here at the Dungeoncast, please spread the word and tell your friends about us. You can find us on soundcloud.com/thedungeoncast, on iTunes, or click the link in our description to hear us on YouTube. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have a question, suggestion, or you just want to say hi, feel free to leave a comment. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at @thedungeoncast, or send us an email at thedungeoncast@gmail.com. That's it for the break. Enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, so you've got a group of players. You're the dungeon master. You have your player's handbook. You sat down to your first game. What am I going to be expecting here? What do I need to make this happen as a player?
Well, as a player, like all you really need is your character sheet and an idea for who your character is, and you're ready to role play it. And then, of course, most importantly, every single person at the table is going to have a set of dice.
So what's on my character sheet exactly?
Your character sheet's going to just have all the information on your character, whether that's like the list of their spells that they have prepared for the day, or all their skills, what they're trained in, what they're not trained in, all the numbers of their ability scores, their inventory, like what do they have on them, weapons, armor.
And is that something that's predetermined? Like when you're starting a game, does your backstory lead into like what you have on you, or
when you build your character, the game kind of gives you a couple mechanical ways to decide like how much gold you have and what armor you can afford to buy at level 1 and all that stuff. And then generally, if a player has a backstory where they would have something in their inventory, I'll generally allow it. Obviously not like, oh yeah, by the way, I totally have this badass.
I brought my bazooka.
And
my bulletproof vest.
+4 bow of killing everything. No, like fuck you and no. So, but yeah, it's like no, my character has like a family crest, an amulet, if you will, of my family crest that's worth 100 gold. Yeah, I'll let that fly. Whatever.
He probably hopefully won't just sell it right off
if he does, I'll be angry. But whatever, we'll figure it out.
Okay, so I've got my character sheet, and it's got my inventory, it's got all my stats on it, my hard stats, what I'm trained in, weapons, all that. So I've got that. What else am I gonna need?
I would say most importantly, you're gonna probably have a set of dice. The game is played with dice.
Like Yahtzee or like?
No. In D&D, you have like all kinds of different like multi-sided dice. The most important would be the D20. It's the dice. It's the die that you're going to be rolling 99% of the time for anything that you are doing, any action that you make that requires a dice roll. And it's literally just I don't remember the name of the shape, but it's a dice with 20 sides, 1 to 20, and you roll it and you add whatever it is that your DM tells you need to add to it, and that's the number that you roll.
So 20 being typically the best number you can roll, and 1 being the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. And generally what you're doing, if you roll a 20, that's considered a critical hit. It's most likely a absolute success, like no questions asked, and a 1 is the polar opposite. It's a crit miss. A 1 is a fail, even if you add everything together and it comes out to a success. You rolled a 1, that's a fail.
So if I roll a d20, I don't know. Give me a scenario. Like what would I need to roll my D20 for? Like put me in a situation as a dungeon master.
Usually any physical attack that you're making, if you're a fighter and you're swinging your sword at that orc, you're rolling a D20 and adding your attack modifier to it. And if you roll a 20, you're going to double the damage. Basically, you're going to roll your damage dice twice, and it's an automatic success. You have hit on that 20. If you roll a 1, you automatically miss.
Okay, so if I roll a 10 for an attack, and I add my attack modifier, which is a stat that I rolled onto my character sheet, right?
Yeah.
So that modifier's at the beginning of the game is typically what, like a +2?
I mean, it varies, but yeah, it's going to be like anywhere from like a +2 to a +5, maybe.
Okay, so if I roll a 10, I add my 5 if my stat is really good,
with
and
a total of 15.
It's now a 15.
Yeah.
Outside of I roll a 20 and it's 25, but like I rolled that 20, so that whatever's happening is happening.
Yeah.
And that extra 5 is gravy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So if I roll let's say I had a +12 to a stat, like let's say a late game or something like that.
Yeah.
I've got this ridiculous monstrous stat and I roll a 1. I add 12 and it's a 13.
Auto fail. I don't care if the monster had 10 AC, you have missed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the D20, what besides attacking, what else are you gonna make me roll a D20 for?
Any type of skill check, if you're trying to be really stealthy as you're, sneaking through the dungeon, you don't want to lure anything ahead of you. I'm gonna make your character roll a stealth check to see how well they're performing that skill.
Okay.
Don't roll a 1. And that's actually something to talk about. Critical hits and critical misses. In game, the rules are they only pertain to attack rolls. And some people don't apply them to skills or whatnot. I love to apply them to skills. I basically apply them to pretty much anything because it's always nice to have that. Like, oh shit, you missed. Like, this ruins everything.
God,
now what happens?
So bad.
Yeah, you're fucking terrible. Go home.
Yeah.
And
don't go home. Keep playing.
Yeah, please. Yeah, don't leave.
That's part of it, is dealing with those mistakes is part of the fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the dice decided, like your character, like fate basically is your D20, and your character is subject to that roll, even though they have a skill. If you critically miss something important, it might change everything, right?
Yeah, it might change everything.
One roll
and
could decide.
just because you rolled the crit miss doesn't mean your character in game fucked up. Like, especially let's say you're a fighter, you're good at fighting, and you happen to miss this orc. It's not because you personally fucked up, but like you said, the dice kind of represents fate. So like maybe where you stepped wasn't even ground like you thought, and you end up slipping a little bit, or maybe the orc just happened to be on top of his game and he just happened to dodge it. So you can kind of spin the crit miss in a way that makes sense if it normally wouldn't. But that's up to the creativity of the dungeon master. But that's the thing when you're playing the game. Some people just have bad luck when it comes to the rolls, and some people have the best luck. And everyone has a different amount of luck when it comes to the rolls, and that's what the actual numbers are there to help mitigate. Is like, sure, maybe you're not the luckiest at rolling, but for the most part, you're still going to be good at what your character's good at because the numbers say they are.
Yeah, my fighter should technically, like, his backstory and it has fighter training. He's supposed to be good at fighting, so my hard stat should reflect that.
Yeah,
and aid my rolls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So there's a D20. Pretty much decides all of your excessive actions that you're gonna do. What's the next dice that we usually need? I heard you say something about attack rolls, damage dice, things like that.
Yeah. So pretty much all the other dice that aren't the D20, for the most part, are strictly damage dice. So every weapon that you're wielding is going to have a multi-sided dice that pertains to the amount of damage it does. Whether it's anywhere from a 1d4, which is the lowest, all the way up to a 1d12, which is the highest. Also, spells have a set amount of damage, so you'll be rolling different multi-sided dice for whatever given spell that you're casting. And yeah, so that, a longsword's like a 1d8, so it can do anywhere from 1 to 8 damage plus whatever your numbers are. Versus like a great axe, which is big heavy weapon, does a 1d12, so anywhere from 1 to 12 on the damage kind of scale there.
Okay, so let's talk more about social side of Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe put your characters in a town setting. What are some of your options if you're a player in, let's say, a medium-sized town? Maybe a couple hundred people live here.
Well, I mean, it's kind of whatever you can think of. It's a town, so it's probably going to have a blacksmith. You're going to have inns. You're going to have people roaming the streets. You're going to have farms. You're going to have, anything. And wherever the characters want to go, the DM just has to be ready to role play that and just go with it.
So if I'm in a town and I want to go talk to the innkeeper, so I would just say my character wants to go talk to the innkeeper, and my character would go there.
Yeah, I would okay, so let's do a little bit of role playing right now.
Okay.
And we're gonna assume that just role play your character in our ongoing game right now, Rohan.
Okay, my character Rohan, he's an air genasi and he's a fighter. I like him a lot. He's got a lot of courage, and he's not the smartest guy, but he knows how to fight, and he's pretty acrobatic and cool. Usually the first thing he wants to do when he gets to town is go to see a blacksmith. So let's say we just broke into town, and Rohan, he wants to go see the blacksmith. Where would I find him? Or I guess I would start asking around. Do I see anybody in the street?
Yeah, you see multiple people walking around. You see a mother walking her 2 children down the street. You see a couple workers carrying buckets of you don't know what because they're in the distance. And you see people bustling all around.
So I'm gonna approach maybe somebody, if there's a burly guy around that might have a weapon on him or something like that. He probably knows where the blacksmith is, so I would try to approach him.
Yeah, you approach him and you ask him where the blacksmith is, and he points you right in the right direction. It's actually right down the main street, and you follow the direction he gave you, and sure enough, after about 50 yards of travel, you actually begin to hear the sounds of a blacksmith shop work.
Okay, that's typically what Rohan would do. He would go talk to the blacksmith and just say hi.
Yeah. So
and introduce himself.
Yeah. So what you do in town, what you do anywhere is really your limit. Your only limit in this game really is your imagination, and of course the rules set, which are the guidelines that keep everything under control.
So what if I'm interested? I'm playing a character that's really interested in finding like buried treasure or something like that.
Okay.
What if I'm in town? What are my options? What's gonna
I mean,
how would I implement that? How would I employ my character to?
I mean, maybe that character is, since they're always looking for hidden treasure, they're always looking for rumors, tips, maps, anything. Maybe they ask around town, they see what the rumors are. Like maybe there's a rumor that old man Jenkins had buried all his wife's, wealth that he inherited after her mysterious death, out in the woods. Everyone sees old man Jenkins go out there sometimes, and no one knows what he's doing.
Old man Jenkins.
Yeah. And then, maybe that character's like, okay, I want to check this out. And he waits out night, and sure enough, there's a strange old man who goes wandering out of town into the woods, and he follows him, and who knows what the fuck happens.
So if I wanted to follow this guy, would I need to roll stealth for that?
Yeah, I'd definitely make you roll stealth for that.
I roll a d20, and okay, what happens if I fail? If I fail the stealth?
If you fail, then the guy's gonna probably hear some rustling or someone following him. He's gonna turn and probably see you, and depending on what's going on, who knows what he is going to do. Maybe he'll attack you. Maybe he's not an old man after all.
Maybe he's a younger man than he looks, and he's about to stab you.
Or maybe he's some monster assuming the role of this old man. And there's some darker thing going on here.
Let's talk about D&D monsters.
Oh gosh, yeah, monsters. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about them. What do you want to know?
Yeah. So, how would this guy be in like his?
How will this guy not be a guy?
Yeah, like how is that possible? What do you mean? Like, is he a shapeshifter?
He could be. He could be. Maybe he's a shapeshifter. Maybe he's a werewolf. Maybe he is a possessed man. Maybe he's possessed by a demon or a ghost or a devil or something. Or maybe he's a cultist. Not to say that makes him not a guy, but generally a cultist is a quote unquote monster or creature in the monster manual that you can then, as a DM, use in a fight.
So what I've noticed about monsters is that they're built a lot like characters. They have somewhat of a backstory, maybe not a personal one, but like, this type of creature typically does this and acts this way.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of lore around pretty much any given creature that you'll find in the monster manual. And what's cool about the monster manual is it's all in there. And you can totally go with it, and like you have all this rich lore you can derive, ideas from, or you could fucking disregard it and like, nope, that's not what demons are in my world. Demons are this. So that bit's up to you. But yeah, every monster it is a character of sorts. Whether it's something as simple as like that rat's a rat who's been living a rat life, or it's this demon has killed 1,000 men. It was summoned from like the X level of the abyss, and like yada yada yada.
Oh man,
so on and so forth. Yeah.
So the monster manual is where you're getting all this information from usually.
Usually, yeah.
Okay, so what other little gems can you find in the monster manual? What does it have to offer me?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the monster manual has literally hundreds of creatures, whether they're magical or mundane, that with a little stat block telling you what basically anything of this species can do, and you can just plop it right into your game for a combat encounter or whatever. D&D's probably has some of the most iconic monsters that you can think of. Dragons, of course, it's Dungeons and Dragons. Demons and devils. There are creatures called beholders. There are creatures that are like chimeras and hydras and goblins and orcs and ogres, and the list goes on and on. There's supernatural creatures like zombies and ghouls and ghasts and ghosts and a lot of fucking G-lettered monsters, apparently. Basilisks, pretty much anything you could think of from legend or lore will be in that book.
So all those things sound pretty terrifying.
Yeah, most of the things in the monster manual you don't want to fucking meet, but you're gonna. So, like, that's why we're playing.
Well, I've seen some things in the monster manual that are not necessarily evil.
Right, that's true.
Like, what are some of those things? Like,
there's angels, there's unicorns and pegasi, and what are not all dragons are evil. Like, there are good and evil dragons. So, you have those. What are some other good creatures?
I've seen like the genies and stuff like that.
The genies kind of ride that line.
Elementals, yeah.
Which, honestly, good and evil. Like, let's talk about good and evil when it comes to D&D and how it pertains to monsters and characters. So in D&D, there is what is called an alignment chart. Anything can fall within the 9 alignments, and there are kind of 2 axes or axes.
Accidents.
There are things that are lawful and things that are chaotic, and of course the neutral between the two. There are things that are good and there are things that are evil, and the neutral between the two. So an example would be like demons are chaotic evil, angels are lawful good, and monsters and NPCs and PCs, players, fall between all of these things.
Is there anything in the monster manual that falls into like completely neutral alignment? Like,
the genies. Some of the genies do. I believe it's the water genies. What are they called? Marids. There is a water genie in the monster manual that I believe falls along the neutral side of things.
And how would this, if you encountered this creature as like a party, what do you think would happen? I mean, if as a neutral creature, maybe you neutrally stumbled upon it and you didn't mean to.
Yeah. So when a character is neutral, it just means like it doesn't really err on the side of good or evil necessarily. Neutral characters are actually usually pretty self-serving, but not in like a nihilistic or insane way that maybe like a chaotic evil person is. Honestly, like a true neutral alignment is generally what most people you're going to meet in real life or in this game. They're just living their lives,
townsfolk,
doing their thing, not really worried about good, evil, or chaos or law. So if you come across a neutral creature, it's just as likely to like disregard you unless it thinks you're a threat as it is to, maybe it's territorial. It's like, no, get the fuck out of my thing. It has nothing to do with good and evil. It's just you're in its fucking place. Get the fuck out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, every character in D&D, whether it be a monster or an NPC, which is a non-player character in a town or something like that, they're going to be aligned on this chart somewhere?
Generally. So in the older editions of D&D, the alignment was literally a mechanic. Like certain spells affected certain people with certain alignments and didn't others.
Oh, is that kind of like a rock paper scissors thing?
I mean, kinda. Basically, like, okay, so if you were a cleric, you maybe had spells that like would only hurt things that were evil, because evil in D&D is like a tangible thing. It's real. There is no question. Like in real life, like, is evil and good real? That's a whole philosophical thing. Who knows? But in D&D, it's established. No, there is good, and it is a thing that you can do, and there is evil, and that is also a thing that you can do and be. And things that were evil, certain spells would only hurt those, and vice versa, or heal, and vice versa.
Okay.
But in today's current D&D, and the way I prefer it is, it's more of a guideline for how your character should act. So generally your character will fall within one of the 9 categories, and that's kind of a basic guideline for like what they would do in a given situation or how they tend to lead their lives. It's definitely not like a hard rule where it's like, no, I'm lawful good, I would never do that. Or maybe it could be, but generally, I like treating the alignments as a guideline, as a soft rule, if you will.
Yeah. So that this chart applies to the character you're building, also, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So as you're building your character, you might want to think, well, this person acts this way, and that's a good thing, or that's generally considered to be good.
Right.
So that makes them good. Is it a set of like rules that they follow that makes them more lawful, right? Versus like, well, I kind of just see things happening and I go help people and I don't really care how it gets done. That's more of a chaotic kind of thing, right?
Right, definitely.
So what would it, like a neutral good or neutral evil act, how would they be in certain situations? Like if somebody was getting robbed, let's say that this neutral good character comes upon a wagon that's being ransacked. What do they do?
I mean, I would imagine most neutral good characters would try and do something to stop it if they felt it was within their power, But like if it was being ransacked and they got there and they were stopping it, but then like guards or something showed up at the scene and then decided to arrest them because there was confusion at the scene. They don't know who was actually robbing who and who was saving what. A neutral good character might just be like, a neutral character could go either way on it. They could go like, okay, I guess I'll just deal with this and like plead my case and then they'll let me go. Or maybe it's like, no, fuck you, and run away. So,
oh yeah, like I wasn't doing anything wrong, and like you're in the wrong for trying to arrest me, so I'm dipping.
Yeah, a neutral character basically like doesn't think that the law is like must be followed, but they generally feel like they understand why laws are there and will generally follow them, unless it's like really against whatever it is they need or want done. While a chaotic person is usually like, fuck the rules, I don't care about the rules are stupid, and the rules make it harder for me to do good things.
So which would you, when you're building a character, would you put the chart first, or would you put your character first and have them fall into the chart?
I always put the chart last when I'm building a character, because oftentimes you'll think that your character is neutral good or lawful good. And then as you get into playing and you're kind of getting the feel for this character that you're role-playing as, and situations are arising, you find that maybe he doesn't quite fit in what you thought he did.
Yeah, like they would react in a situation differently than a lawful good might act,
right?
Depending on what's going on.
Generally, I would say make your character, make your backstory, role play it, and see where it goes. And then as you continue to play this character, you'll have a better idea of where they fit when it comes to that alignment chart.
So it's not like, oh, I built this character and it's concrete.
Right.
This character lives in this world and experiences things and makes decisions and has new memories and changes.
Yeah.
So how often is it that you see a character start in some kind of like they come into the game as a lawful good, but as they role play and hopefully they role play well and they're subjected to all these things, maybe they kind of tend to go more toward a neutral. They're still good. Yeah. Probably good characters always stay good.
Yeah.
Typically, but maybe they'll go more towards neutral or even chaotic and more extreme.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. Like, especially like if you got a long-term game that players are showing up to every week and the story's going and things are happening, like, yeah, that's the thing. Like in real life, your characters are going to have opinions change when they see certain things happen, or, you know, they might have philosophical idea changes, or, you know, who knows.
Okay, so we've talked about what you need to play D&D, like the physical things. You need your character sheet, and you need your dice, and you probably, you know, a pencil.
Yeah.
You're going to be erasing.
And you're going to need your player's handbook to create the character. And as a dungeon master, you're going to need the monster manual for any type of creature that you're going to need, or NPC. And also, there's another book we haven't talked about called the Dungeon Master's Guide, which the Dungeon Master will need for, like, there's items in there. There's all kinds of rules for any situation you could possibly think of. It's probably in there.
Okay, so typically when you're using the Dungeon Master's Guide and you're opening the book, where are you usually flipping to first? Where do you find yourself most?
Me
most
personally,
in the book? Yeah.
If some like environment rule or something, like some question comes up, I'm like, man, I actually don't know what to do there. Let's see what the Dungeon Master's Guide has to say about it. And I have my DM guide is all tabbed out with like different sections, and like, so like hazardous traps, like I'll just flip to that real quick and be like, oh, okay, that's how that works. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
So stuff like that. Also, like, all your magic items are in that book. So if there's like treasure or anything that you're ready to dole out to your players that your players stumble upon, all the stats and everything you need to know about those items are in the Dungeon Master Guide.
So that sounds pretty handy.
Yeah, definitely.
Have with you, especially during a game.
I would say the Dungeon Master Guide is the book you need the least to play. And honestly, you could just make stuff up and you don't need that book at all. But it is a nice tool to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't so you're not forced to think of everything. Maybe you don't want to have the time.
Yeah, definitely.
You just want to flip oh yeah, this is how this works, and it says right here.
Yeah.
So that's what mechanical D&D is for, as I'll probably keep referring to it as that.
Yeah.
But let's say I have all my materials to play the game, and I'm sitting down, but like the intangibles, like how much time am I going to need to do this?
That varies from group to group. I personally like to have 3.5 to 4 hour games. And I think most people fall right into that time frame right there. Sometimes you don't have that luxury and you can only sit down and play for an hour and a half. And that's okay too. Usually those games are a little less serious because they don't have time to be more serious. But I've seen people play up to like 8-9 hours.
What about playing for 4 hours ish? Is like, do you feel like why is that the optimal amount of time?
I just find it's the most ample amount of time for like enough story to get covered, for everyone to do the things that they want to do, and to push the campaign forward enough for it to justify everyone kind of bending their schedule to kind of be there at the same time.
So with the luxury of a 4 hour game,
right.
How often do you recommend a party and a DM meet to have that game?
As often as you want to. It's a freaking fun game. It's my favorite pastime. So if I could play every day, I would. Obviously, I can't. I mean, we have an ongoing bi-weekly game because that's just as much as we can fit it between 5 guys. But if you could do weekly or bi-weekly, hell yeah. Like, fuck, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Like, that's really cool.
You'd be moving right along.
Oh, yeah.
At the pace we play, things I'm always so eager to get to the next game.
Yeah.
It is a lot of fun getting down, sitting down and exploring all of these different facets of not only my character, but the world that we're put into, the world that you, the Dungeon Masters, created. I do want to talk a little bit about interactions socially between characters in a party. Yeah. What's acceptable? What's Is there something acceptable? Is there a guideline to follow?
Table etiquette?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say definitely. And that should, a lot of that stuff you want to establish at the creation of the group and of the game. And usually that's either going to be like the DM is going to be the one who kind of like sets the rules. House rules, yeah. Or maybe it's the person who hosts it. But either way, you need to set those rules at the beginning. For instance, I don't really tolerate in like player-on-player violence unless it's 100% in character and both out of character players have agreed that no, this is a thing, and like, don't worry, we're not going to let it ruin the game.
Yeah, or God forbid, like a friendship or something.
A friendship, or like, you know what?
It's not that serious. Dungeons and Dragons is kind of serious, but it's not. It's never that serious.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, a lot of people have a hard time separating themselves from their character, and like they'll take things personally, and like, again, that's why I don't allow it. I highly, highly recommend that you just don't really get into in-character fighting unless it's really in character and it's something you really want to explore. And out of character, no hard feelings. But in character, you know, maybe these dudes hate each other. And that's the thing. Like, I've been involved with games. Like, I've been a player in games where I played a wizard. He was kind of a jerk, but I felt like he wasn't like too much of a jerk. He just was kind of a little arrogant, and I tried to role play that. And the players that I was playing with, I don't know if they had a problem out of character with it, or they were just really felt like their character would do the things that they would do. But after barely like a one session, the fighter in the group just kept having a serious issue with my character, and he actually in character put his hands on my character more than a couple times. And again, I don't advocate player-on-player violence, so I did everything I could to like justify why my character wouldn't cast a fireball spell or something on this dude. Who, like seriously, I don't even remember what I said, but me and the fighter began to in character have a little bit of a tiff about what we should do next. And the fighter literally, the guy was like, my Goliath backhands Brandis. That was the name of the wizard at the time. His name was Brandis. And I'm just like, I paused. I was like, okay, like, did you really do that? Did you really like backhand my guy with your gauntleted hand? He's like, yes, I did that. And he was like hyper aggressive on me, like out of character too. I'm like, all right, rolls up my sleeves. Like, I fucking incinerated him. Like, he I'm like, dude, I'm a fucking pyromaniac wizard. So like, I cast burning hands on him. He held up his shield. He charged me. I shielded. I teleported back. I fireballed him. I pissed on his ashes. I was done, and then I quit that game because I had talked to the DM the game earlier, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I feel like this player is like having a serious issue with my character, and what should I do about it? And is there anything you can do to kind of arbit this? Because like, I really don't want to do player-on-player violence, and you know, I feel like he's going to keep pushing my character. He's already put his hands on me a few times, and the DM literally was just like, yeah, whatever happens, man. You guys figure it out yourselves. I'm like, that's not how I would DM this game, but okay.
Yeah, maybe you try to, in these scenarios when you're not as much as in character as you probably should be, maybe the DM should step in and mitigate that damage.
Yeah, absolutely. But like I would never let one of my players just bitch slap another player on fucking Warren. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? Like, I was flabbergasted, dude, and I was so angry out of character and in character because like my dude was already kind of a jerk as it was. So yeah, like I lit him on fire till he died.
Well, let's talk about. It sounds like you lost D&D that day.
Yeah, I feel like everyone lost that day.
So you can lose D&D. Can you win at D&D?
I mean, you can win as much as like you can. Your character can succeed at the thing it is they're trying to do, but it's not like other games where like, you know, there is this end game and like, okay, you won the game, it's over.
Yeah, like, there's no roll credits or anything like that.
Did Frodo win the game when he finally got that ring in Mount Doom? I mean, yeah, kinda, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah, spoilers for anyone who hasn't.
Oh my God.
Seen that. You know, because you know.
Oh geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did throw the ring in the.
Yeah, the ring was in fact destroyed and Middle Earth was saved.
Oh my God. Amazing.
But
so Frodo, quote unquote, and I am doing the air quotes, won the game. If Lord of the Rings was in a D&D setting, he won.
Kind of.
As much as that story arc seems to have ended.
The story ended. And what happened.
D&D is treated like life, more rather, where the timeline never really, time keeps going.
Yeah. can you win at life? I mean, yeah, kinda. Like you can succeed at the things you're going for.
You can accomplish things.
Yeah, you can accomplish things.
But then life ends and you roll a new character.
Yeah,
or
hopefully,
or you go or you don't. Let's not talk about that.
Yeah, let's not get into that. That's not what this podcast is about.
So it sounds like winning D&D is just having a good time.
Yeah, it's about exploring. It's about putting yourself into a different set of shoes and exploring it. It's about having fun with friends at a table. Oftentimes, D&D leads to hilarious situations, and it's just a blast. It's my favorite game in the world.
So we do have table etiquette, and we do have guidelines as to things you shouldn't do. But beyond that, maybe like there's so much freedom. Yeah. Every time I play, there's all these boundless possibilities, and the only thing that really binds me from going everywhere and doing everything is unfortunately time. And my character, he probably wouldn't want to go look through every nook and cranny of every fucking town that we go roll into. He wants to go talk to the blacksmith. He wants to check out some weapons, maybe go have some beer or some food. and he's more in town. He's a pretty simple guy.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, I just let him do his thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I feel it is like I allow my character to be themselves.
Right.
And I try to make that as easy of a process as possible, and I learn with my character. Mm-hmm. So that's been a lot of fun playing in this game. So
well, here's a question for you. I've been meaning to ask you anyways, like, because you have DM'd a couple games now. Which do you prefer to do? Which do you find is more enjoyable?
Oh my gosh. Man, I've only played one character, so I would love to play more characters to really explore that. And I would love to DM more games because I'm so new to this. I've only been playing for like 4 or 5 months.
Something like that, yeah.
And with us playing bi-weekly, that's not too much, but I think I really like to Dungeon Master. That like the amount of creative outlet that provides for me is just crazy. I get to do I get to build whatever I want, and then you also have to think on the spot when people are in your world. Mm-hmm. You got to really be ready for anything.
Yeah, definitely.
Your character can do. I mean, if they're acting in character, they can still surprise you. Yeah, like you can't account for everything. You can't possibly account with like 2 people. There's no way.
No, they say no. Every great D&D, every great DM plan is ruined the moment it touches player contact. The minute players contact your campaign, it's just everything goes to shit.
I would imagine,
but in a great way.
That's why people put their campaign on rails. They don't like their hard work going to waste.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, to me, D&D isn't about being a dungeon master. Isn't about telling the greatest story ever or trying to tell your tale. It's about being an arbiter for the players and making sure the players are having fun, and also, like you said, that creative outlet. It's as much of a game of exploration and discovery for me as the dungeon master as it is for you guys as players, despite the fact that I create the world around you. Hey, everybody, and with that, we're going to call it a game. But before we go, we're going to leave you with a little bit of Sage DM wisdom to help you set forth on your adventure. Straight from the Sage DM himself, the Sage DM. Take it away, Sage DM.
Hey, everybody. This is the Sage DM here with your Sage DM advice for the week. Remember, when you're in the tavern, beer before liquor, never been sicker. But liquor before beer, you're in the clear. That's your Sage DM advice for the week. Goodbye!